All right, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Good. What was that? Great, okay. Welcome to the Bankhead Theater. Who's here for the first time today? Well, thank you for coming. So been here before? All right. Who likes wine? A couple hands go up. If you're under 21, you should not raise your hand, by the way. My name is Chris Carter. I'm the development director here at the Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center. I work here at the Bankhead Theater, and we are a nonprofit cultural arts organization that believes technology and science and the arts are a great blend, much like a good wine. And that's why we're here today. And this event would not be possible without the support of a lot of people and a lot of donors, because it's a free event for our community and we wanted to provide it. So I just want to say quickly thank you to our sponsors, TopCon, Lamb Research, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Majestic Net, Giraffe Space, Black Lab R&D, Cisco Systems, Sandia National Labs, School Retooled, Tri-Valley Coder Dojo, the Livermore School District, Livermore Science and Society Center, The Independent, Google, and Castlight. Also, before we start, I want to remind you where the exits are, just in case we need to leave quickly. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speaker now that's coming up. His name's Karl Wente. Karl is a fifth-generation winemaker and senior vice president of winemaking. He oversees all winemaking at Wente Family Estates. Karl joined the family business in 2001 and has led wine innovation, started Nth Degree, and helped expand the Wente Family Estates portfolios. His education includes a degree in chemical engineering from Stanford University and 2 master's degrees, one in horticulture and one in food science, which he got both in 2 years, so pretty smart guy. Karl balances his strong academic background with the traditional hands-on approach of previous generations of Wente family winemakers. Karl grew up working at the winery and expanded his experience with work at Peter Michael Winery in Sonoma and Brown Brothers Winery in Northern Victoria, Australia. Now, when Karl is not making wine or out in the vineyard, you can catch him playing music with his local band, so art and science and wine again, practicing yoga, or reading and listening to audiobooks. Please welcome Karl Wente.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, and thank you to the LV PAC, the Bankhead, and everyone for being here. I am a great supporter of both science and the arts, and I love getting the next generation involved and creating a passion about all of those things. And so just thank you so much. So Livermore Valley, and when Kieran asked me to speak, again, is Kieran here? I'd like to give a personal thanks to her as well. And when she asked me to speak, she sort of told a funny story of her daughter was going into one of the high school or going into a program and learning about wine and using wine as a medium to teach science. And she thought, oh, we can't use that. That doesn't make any sense. But then when she got in it and all of the steps along the way and realized what a great opportunity is to talk about the soils, the grapevine, the fruit flavors, the primary fermentation, all the way through the aging chemistry of wine, it is a great journey to really talk about various facets of science. But we start here in the Livermore Valley, where we definitely have a culture of science. 2 great laboratories, one of the highest per capita PhDs in the nation. We've got a lot of smart, interesting, dynamic, awesome people that live here in the Livermore Valley. We also have a great culture of art around here. So I definitely thank all of the supporters of arts and culture that we have in Livermore. And we also have a culture of grapes and wine. And so I think those 3, along with the Stockmen's Association and the rodeo, if we see the emblem of Livermore, we have the science, we have the rodeo and the cowboys, and we have the vintners and the winemakers. So great culture that we have here in the Livermore Valley. And, again, I talked about how wine provides this opportunity to really talk about so many different disciplines. And, art and science, and people will ask me, is it more art? Is it more science? And I just deflect the question because it doesn't matter. It's a beautiful blend of both. And at the end, you have a glass of wine, which is very much an art form to be enjoyed. And it's a scientific process and an artistic process along the way. Science and art, but then you also technology, engineering, math. You have farming equipment, you have presses and different separation technology, you have vessels, right? Stainless steel comes in before it was oak and concrete and skins and clay pots and all the different materials that go along with how you'll have a fermentation happening. But so to STEM, STEAM, bringing the arts in, I love that. So science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. I'm passionate about all of those. I love them. I'm one of these weird people in this world that I think mathematics is the most beautiful language there is, and I love diving into that. If I didn't think there was a chance I was gonna go into wine, I would have studied applied mathematics just because I thought it was the coolest thing, and maybe going into physics. But alas, into chemistry, chemical engineering, and also microbiology and organic chemistry, and really opened beautiful doors to how the world works and understanding things. So Livermore Valley. So take a little step back. 1776, Juan Bautista de Anza was allegedly the first European to view this beautiful valley way back when. Then we jump forward to, this is a touchy one, we jump forward to 1835 where Robert Livermore was given a land grant, 20,000 acres from the Mexican government, and to set up Livermore where it is right now. And then you go the gold rush. So 1848 to 1855. In the 1840s, there's about 8,000 Westerners in the state of California. And then the discovery of gold and those numbers just took off. And it really coincided, the statehood came along, but also coincided with the steamship, another piece of technology that allowed a massive influx, because the Transcontinental Railroad wasn't completed at the time, but you're able to deliver lots and lots of people in search of gold. And Livermore, we have our San Francisco, the Bay, and this was one of the easiest pathways coming right across there to get up to Sacramento. If you're coming from San Fran or Oakland and try and head up, it got marshy, wetlands, and getting across. And so Livermore really became the first stop. Coming from Oakland, come from San Francisco, the port's in there. So Livermore was a place that a lot of people traveled through and really grew to appreciate the beautiful Golden Hills. And also the Western Europeans that came, they bring their culture with them, and with that comes grapevines, and they recognize Livermore as an outstanding place for growing high quality grapes and high quality wines. So, and then in 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed and had a stop that came right through town, right where the tracks are today. And so it really drove the commerce of Livermore and the wine. So I thought this was interesting as I was going through. 8,000 Westerners, the native population wasn't part of the census and the infinite wisdom of our government at the time, but you see the gold rush comes in there, and then it's just that explosion that comes through. And a lot of them pass through Livermore, again, because of the gold rush, that first stop traveling through. So then the 1880s really drove the wine growers coming into Livermore, and you had the likes of C.H. Wente, my great-great-grandfather, Louis Mell, James Kincannon, bunch of different wineries popped up, and there's some images. This is Charles Wetmore, and Charles Wetmore was the first agricultural commissioner of California, and he established the California Grapevine Commission, whereby he went to Europe, went to the likes of Chateau Margaux, Chateau Yquem, bunch of other great estates and chateaus in Western Europe, and brought back cuttings. Because how many people have had a glass of wine that came from Native American grapes? Probably not a lot. It's not very good. The noble grapevine is Vitis vinifera, and so Charles Wetmore lived in Livermore, and he went over there and brought these cuttings back, and it really established the Livermore Valley as the preeminent growing region. The first international gold medal from a California wine came out of the Livermore Valley, and so it was really a great place, and so we pay homage to Charles Wetmore. But then as we go through some of these pictures, really see how much money and how much was put in, and this is all in Livermore. This was out by the railroad tracks there, and people just came in and they recognized how great of a place it was, very close to Oakland, very close to San Francisco and the ports you have there, and the amount of people that were flowing through still chasing gold. And so just a lot of great, and this is over the Ruby Hill. The building looks very much like that as it sits today. And you just see some of these are all Livermore Valley buildings. This was our homestead, our winery, another image of it there. But then just the digging of the caves, I mean, just the amount of time and effort that went into treasuring, harnessing the potential of these beautiful grapevines, which I'll talk more about, but then how you're gonna get those into the bottle and then have them enjoyed by their fellow man. So again, this is all Livermore Valley, all part of our history and part of our culture. Think about that rail truck and how do you move that wine? How do you get it somewhere? And just the simple ingenuity of let's just throw those casks right up on that rail truck and take it wherever it needs to go. Again, those beautiful carvings that are in there, the caves, wine presses. And so you can see just the technology that goes into it, where winemaking is a very old art form, but you know, it's the tools that we use today haven't changed all that much, because it is, at the end of the day, a very simple process. Grow grapes, ferment grapes, age wine, enjoy that glass of wine. So again, Livermore, this is Mines Road would be hitting up there. You can see those beautiful shots. These head-trained grapevines out there. Everything was dry farmed back in the day, but now we have irrigation going into drip irrigation. So I also want to pay homage that then you come the 40s and 50s, you have Lawrence Livermore and Sandia, and again, just the culture, that science and wine coming together with our heritage of the rodeo as well. So grapes, wine, science. So we talk about the five senses, and wine is something that allows all five senses to come to light, right? And so sight, you look at it, whether it's a white wine, that beautiful golden color, or it's a red wine, that intense color, which comes from the conjugation of organic molecules and those electrons being shared between molecules in there to give that beautiful red color. Then we have the smell. We all know you can stick your nose in a glass of wine and you can get aromas like, you know, grape, cherry, cumin, coriander, nutmeg, clove, vanilla, honey, butterscotch, apple, pear, mango, papaya, guava. I mean, all of these different things are molecules that are going through retronasally. Your nose is grabbing it. It's effectively an electron spectroscope, so it'll feed electrons through that molecule, causing that molecule to vibrate, and then based on how that molecule vibrates, it'll then send a signal to your head to say, oh, that's honey, or oh, that's butterscotch. So it's really all of this is vibrationally driven based on these molecules. And then taste, right? There's the old world of taste where it was just salt and sweet and sour and umami, but really there's a lot more complexity to how that comes in as well, plus the retronasal of those molecules coming back. And so I really look at taste and smell are very intermingled in there. And then wine as well. The tactile sensation, right? The largest organ we have is our skin, and so that sense of touch and how it works. And one of the most important facets of wine and winemaking is making something that has a tactile sensation that feels good, right? And so this is not your taste, this is just how it feels and that interaction in your mouth. And then lastly, sound. How does sound come in? That's why we clink glasses. Right, and so it is to complete the five senses. So anytime you have a cheers, have a toast, think about that, completing the five senses in there. And again, all of those are vibrationally driven phenomena, right? The vibration of the light waves coming into your eyes, the vibration of the sound waves from the clink of the glass, the vibration of the molecule that's in your nose that's sending the signal, the vibration of the molecule that's literally touching your cheek on the inside. So it's all of these it's all vibrational driven, and it's all sense data that's coming back to us. And so wine really provides that great opportunity to get in touch with all of those five senses. Also, wine is the medium that we put in our mouth that has the largest number of diverse individual molecules. Out of everything. You can get to really complex sauces, wine still has more. You can get to anything, right? And just now, why does wine have so many diverse, unique, independent molecules? That's what we'll talk a little bit about now. So first, the grapevine itself. I mean, every grapevine is different, and every berry on each grapevine is different. And then so you're going to have the soil. And in Livermore, we have these alluvial fans that come out, right? As the river has meandered, it has brought the soil with it. And so you have lots of different soil structures because over the millennia, the rivers have wandered in various spots. And then as you get up the hills, you get a little bit more of the clay content. Ruby Hills, named because of that red clay that's going up there. And so it's really important to plant your grapevines in the right location based on that soil. And then the rootstock. How many have heard the word phylloxera, right? That root louse that came. And so now when we plant grapevines, we actually have a different species, that's the rootstock, than is what's the scion that's growing up top. So you literally take an American grapevine, cut it, take a European grapevine, stick it together. I mean, you can darn near just duct tape it, and that has enough. Two different species, it has enough intuitive intelligence to latch up, and the xylem and the phloem come together, and then so the vascular tissue is put together. So you have a rootstock down there, and then you have the soil, the rootstock, and then you have the scion, which is your Vitis vinifera. And Vitis vinifera is the noble grapevines that make wine, and it's really pretty miraculous that Vitis vinifera grows sugar, accumulates sugar to the point where the yeast will convert it into alcohol, about that 13 to 14% alcohol. And at that point, the yeast are right at the end of their tolerance for how much alcohol they can handle, right? And also Vitis vinifera, it has tartaric acid as the primary acid in there. And that is one of the few organic acids that's non-bioavailable. So that just means that no bacteria can eat that acid. So it makes it inherently incredibly stable. So all of those things coming together, and then the beautiful flavors that come out of it. So touchy. So then with those grapevines, you can have Cabernet, Chardonnay, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Tempranillo, Trigo Nacional, Trigo Francesca, Suzal, Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, Syrah, Sauv, Grenache, Graciano, Orange Muscat, Muscat Canelli, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese. I mean, all of these different grapevines are Vitis vinifera, and they each have different makeup and composition with this incredible diversity of molecules, both in the juice and in the skins of those berries. And so now, a fake grape, a synthetic grape flavor. Yeah, you can have Welch's grape juice that has that distinct sort of grapey fake flavor, but as you get into any of the grapes that we eat, you can't duplicate it because the sheer magnitude of the diversity of molecules in those grapes, so you can't make it up. Watermelon, there's only a few that drive those flavors. It's pretty easy to make a synthetic watermelon flavor that tastes pretty similar to watermelon, but as it relates to grapes, because of all of those different molecules in there, very hard to reproduce. Thus, when it comes into making wine, you have this incredible diversity and array of molecules that are, again, hitting your taste sense, going retronasally to your nose, and then just the overall senses associated with it. So overall, there's 4 places where wine gets its flavor. We already talked about the grapes and all of those flavors that can come through and the aromatics. But then so grapes talked about, second is the yeast. So now you take grapes, and we'll say we're making white wine, say we're making Chardonnay. You take those grapes and you press it, and so you separate the juice out, and then you let the juice settle, because all those solids are going to come down, and then you take the clean juice off of the top, and then the yeast go to work in the fermentation. So you can inoculate it, means you're putting in dried yeast, or you can have it go natural. And my first boss told me that walking through a winery and trying not to get yeast on you is like going through a car wash and trying not to get wet. It just doesn't happen, right? There's native yeasts that are absolutely everywhere. So now during the peak of this fermentation, when all of these yeast cells gobbling up all of the sugar and converting it into alcohol, pop quiz. How many yeast cells do you think there are for every milliliter of fluid? 750 million. 750 million unique individual organisms for every milliliter of fluid. So inevitably, there's many different yeast species in there going to work, but they're gobbling up the sugar. CO2 and ethanol are the byproduct of that. Now, at 750 million yeast cells per every milliliter of fluid, do you expect that yeast to impart flavor on the wine itself? Inevitably, right? And now at the end of the fermentation, if you want to do something called sur-lie aging or batonnage, you age it on the yeast lees. So that yeast will settle down to the bottom, and then you'll open a barrel and you'll stir that up. And by stirring that up, you're getting the autolysis and the opening of those yeast cells. So now you have all of these interesting yeasty, nutty, creamy, dough-like characteristics that can be imparted in. So now we're back to that largest number of diverse molecules. So many, there's no fruit that has as many diverse molecules as Vitis vinifera grapes. Next, you have the yeast, and like think of the great breads out there, where you have the beautiful aromas that are coming through. Lots of that is yeast-driven, and so you impart some of that into the wine itself. So you can see how those are, the number of molecules is growing. Next, oak. So barrel making 101. You take an oak tree, Ozarks, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Arkansas, cut it down. They grow nice and tall and straight. You cut it down, you quarter it, so you make these big long pie wedges, and then you saw them into staves. And then you leave these staves out for anywhere from 24 to 36 months, where you just cross-hatch them, and they're just hanging out there. It's raining on them, mold's growing on them, they're just seasoning out there. And then you take the barrels into the cooperage, you sand them down, and then you bend them over an oak fire, or you can steam bend them, or you can hot water bend them. And as we're thinking about flavors, do you think there's going to be different flavors that come out of it if you do it with fire versus steam versus hot water? Inevitably. And then you put them over an oak fire and you toast them and you bake them. So you're basically, thermally degrading the inside of that oak barrel. And the wood is made up of lignin, cellulose, sugar, and water. That's a gross generalization for that tree, but that's really what's there. Now, lignin gives wood its structural stability. It's this big natural polymer. And when you toast lignin or break down lignin, you get molecules that are very similar to, if not exactly, cumin, clove, coriander, vanillin, almond extract, and some of those ground spices. So you can see now the diversity of flavors that are coming through from the oak and the diversity of the number of molecules that are coming through from the oak. Then when you toast cellulose, you get toasty characteristics. If I gave everybody a baguette and an oven and said, let's make crostinis, someone might go at a 225 degrees for a long time, and you'll get a toastiness, but it'll depend, and someone might go at 500 degrees. You better watch it, because that'll burn and crisp real fast. So now think of the spectrum of flavors that you can get across the toasting of that cellulose from the tree that will then, with storage in contact with the wine, impart those molecules into the wine. Lastly, there's sugar, because that tree is taking water from its roots and pulling it up through the leaves without expending any energy, which is pretty mind-blowing that a redwood can take water from its roots 400 feet up into the air just on the pure suction power. And then it's the leaves in the beautiful process of photosynthesis, whereby that plant takes a water molecule, takes a CO2 molecule in, splits it apart, takes a 5-carbon sugar, makes a 6-carbon sugar, and you have glucose. And that process of photosynthesis, when I was getting my master's at Davis and really studying plant physiology and went through the dynamics of photosynthesis and how it works, my mind popped. It blew my mind. It's so awesome how phenomenal plants are. So now that sugar that is going from the leaves down to the roots so that plant can grow, when you toast sugar, what do you get? Caramelization. Now think about the spectrum of caramelization that you get. If I gave everyone a frying pan and a cup of sugar and said, let's caramelize this, again, low temperature, you can get honey butterscotch all the way through like a burnt toffee characteristics. So now, these are just from the barrel. You have this cumin, clove, coriander, nutmeg, vanillin. You have all these different toasty characteristics, thinking from your lightest toast through a burnt to a crisp. And then you have all the caramelization flavors as well that comes from the sugar within the barrel. So just think about this broad array of different molecules that are making their way into just one simple sip of wine of Chardonnay. The oak barrels, and then lastly, malolactic fermentation. So the primary acids in Vitis vinifera grapes is tartaric acid, which blissfully is non-bioavailable. That means bacteria are not going to eat it. Now, there is some malic acid in grapes as well. It's the second most prominent. And malic acid is readily bioavailable. That means bacteria will gobble up that malic acid. And it gobbles that malic acid and converts it into lactic acid. And as part of that secondary fermentation by a bacteria, a molecule called diacetyl is produced, and that diacetyl is perfectly a popcorn butter aroma. So now, if you think about Chardonnay and you can have this apple, pear, citrus, different characters from the fruit, and then you can have cumin, coriander, nutmeg, vanilla, toasty characteristics from the barrel, and then you can have yeasty, creamy, nutty, dough-like characteristics that'll come from the surly aging, and then you can have a buttery characteristic and come from malolactic fermentation. So it's really just paying homage to the immense diversity of different molecules that are sensorially recepted by us, sending signals to the brain that makes us say, wow, that's a oaky, toasty, buttery Chardonnay that has great apple, pear, citrus, a little bit of a lavender characteristic on the background, and a nice buttery note. And all of those different things are then going through. Your nose is picking them up, putting this electron spectroscope going through, getting the vibrational pattern of that molecule, and then sending that signal to your head and saying all of that. And so really wine is one of the really, has the most out there and really can say, can get you philosophical. And Louis Pasteur said, there's more philosophy in a single glass of wine than in every book I've ever read. Right, just because of that. And every sip is going to be different as well because of the time and the aging and how it goes. So, and then as part of the culture as well, once man stopped moving around 20,000 some odd years ago, coincides with our first pottery, finding the first artifacts of pottery in the fossil records and just dating back. And so the history of wine really follows the history of materials and the history of vessels and containers, right? You have redwood, oak, other woods when you can put those barrels together, but also clay and pottery, right? Those clay pots were more about being able to harness that fruit and ferment it and have a good party than it was about storing leftover food for anything else. So humans really drove a lot of their making of containers in order to capture and harness wine and enjoy that sensory journey that goes along with enjoying that sip of wine. And then steel comes along. And mild steel is not good for wine because I'll get into redox reaction and the chemistry of aging and oxygen and how that plays through into the wines itself. But because those ions in that steel can interact with the wine, it'll change the flavors of the wine more than we want. Then come glass-lined steel. So now that glass, the silica dioxide, lining the inside of that mild steel, now you have something that's very inert so you can control your wine. And then come alloys and stainless steel where those ions are not interacting with the wine. So all of those different things really sort of play through, but the coincidence that man stopped moving around right about the time that those clay pots came to be, right about the time that they were really harnessing Vitis vinifera and staying put, they thought, wait, it's probably worth staying here until next year to harness the potential of that beautiful wine. Now that we have a pot to get it in and we're starting to understand how to make good stuff. So then, lastly, just the organic aging has to do with the redox, reduction and oxidation and how oxygen plays through into the aging of wine. Why do some people lay down their Cabernet for 7 years before they want to drink it? Well, that cork is just insulation to the oak tree, and an average cork has about 10 square meters of surface area to which oxygen can adhere. It's a fair bit, and those oxygen molecules will slowly make it into the wine, and they'll interact with the wine, and the molecules will combine in different ways, and then you'll have this aldehydic cross-linking of some of the tannins that give the mouthfeel to the wine, and some of the color and how that all goes, and so that wine will slowly change over time as well. So it just gives another sort of fun way to look at organic chemistry and how things evolve. Now, if you go to a screw cap, so you don't have that 10 square meters of oxygen getting into your cork and you put that on, now it creates more of a reductive environment because that oxygen is not there. So Is one better than the other? No, it just creates differences. And I think really the beauty of wine and why Pasteur said there's more philosophy in a single glass of wine than every book he'd read is because of the diversity of all of this. And you open it, you leave it out. Every sip is going to be different because of that oxygen interaction into the wine itself and how it goes. So it really creates great conversation pieces and just great philosophical questions as well, because there's also no right answer to this, because only you yourself know what the best wine is to you in that moment. And so the inherent subjectivity of all of this as well. There's no one right answer for what's the best out there, but you just try and work with all of the various tools that you have as a winemaker, trying to put all of these diverse molecules together in the right ratios whereby someone's going to take a sip and say, yum, that tastes good at the end of the day. So, the soil through the glass of wine, right? You have the makeup of the soil. What's your zinc, boron, molybdenum, potassium, your nitrogen levels? What's your cation exchange capacity? What's your organic matter? What's your water holding capacity of the soil? Then you have your scion, or excuse me, your rootstock. Then how does that grow? If that was a rootstock that evolved near a river or evolved in a desert, it's going to have different ways those roots go down. And then you have the grapevine itself. And then you have the grapevine, each individual berry was a flower, a self-pollinated flower that forms that berry. And then you take all of those molecules into the winery. And then you have your oak, your fermentation, your oak aging, and all of this. And so it really just, it's all about the senses that come through the glass of wine and the beauty that goes along with it. But there's just so many facets of the parallels of human and scientific evolution and how it relates to wine once the Westerners came here not too far after the gold rush. So with that, again, I say thank you all so much, and to the kids that are here that are looking forward to getting into science, technology, engineering, math, arts, and the likes, keep at it. There's a lot of fun to be had in it, lots of interesting things and places it can take you. So. And with that, any questions? Yes, sir.
How do you know when it's time to pick the grapes? Do you test the grapes chemically, or?
So the question was, how do you know when it's time to pick? And there's no right answer to this one as well, but we'll test them for sugar content. We'll test them for pH, which is the negative log base 10 of the proton concentration in solution, or another way of saying acidity. And then we'll test it for titratable acidity as well. And then one of the most important things is every vineyard before we pick, we're out in the field tasting. And to see what those flavors are and to think about how those flavors are going to translate into the wine that you're looking to make. But you take Chardonnay, and we pick Chardonnay at 18% sugar. That's so acidic you couldn't stand it, but we make sparkling wine out of it. And then we pick it at 21% sugar and make Eric's Chardonnay, a stainless steel style. And then we pick it at 25% sugar and make a big, rich, barrel-fermented Chardonnay. So it depends on the style that you're looking for, but definitely we're out there testing them. But there's no analytical tools in the wine industry that are as powerful as our nose and our mouth and experience. Yes, sir.
So again, with Chardonnay, you have morning fog, you find in Safeway. You have the nth degree, you find in the tasting room. There's a huge variation in price. What goes into the whole cost structure?
That's a fair question. And so for the Wente vineyards, we have 5 Chardonnays. One is 100% Chardonnay Brut sparkling wine. One is Eric's Chardonnay. One is Morning Fog. One is Riva, and one is Nth Degree. And they're all different. And ultimately, the question was what goes into the cost structure associated with it. And basically, it's how much it costs you to farm the grapes, what sort of barrels you use, and new barrels, new French oak can be $1,200, $1,500 per barrel, per 60-gallon barrel, and then is your packaging and all of those costs that go along with it. And so it's just, all those that go in, and there's no sustainability as a business, certainly a family business, of spending $20 to make a $15 bottle of wine. And so it's really just getting that all aligned through there. And Chardonnay, when I was in high school, my Uncle Phil said, which I'm sure some of you know, Phil Wente's on the board of the LV Pack, and he said, Chardonnay is the grape that allows the winemaker the broadest palette upon which to paint, because of all of those choices that can go in. And every time, right, if you stir the barrels, you're adding costs, right? Because you got to go in individual barrel by barrel, the new barrels, the weight of the bottle, the type of the cork, all of these things that go in. Any others? Yes, sir.
Do the vines have like a shelf life? Do you have to periodically replace them?
Yep. So the question was, do the vines have a shelf life? And ultimately, the IRS says you should depreciate them over 25 years. So plus or minus in there somewhere. But now we have vines that were planted in 1965, and they are just trucking along. I was in Australia, I worked a vintage down there and tasted wine off 130-year-old Grenache vines. Right, so they'll survive, but they do, they weaken over time and they're more susceptible to disease and pest pressures out there. So yeah, you want to turn them over somewhat, 30, 35 years they go, but it just depends, right? And at the end of the day, there'll come a point where you don't get enough yield off of them to cover the costs, then it comes back to you all of a sudden have this fruit that has an astronomical price tag on it because those old vines don't yield. So as good as that quality may be, there just becomes a tipping point. But it's just depends. There's no set answer to it.
Do you do the grafting inside now in a controlled area?
Yeah, so the question was, do we do the grafting inside in a controlled area? And when we buy grapevines, new grapevines, we say we want this rootstock and this scion. And a lot of it will be our own wood, like the Wente clone of Chardonnay that started here in 1912, which makes up about 80% of all California Chardonnay planting. We'll send them our wood to a nursery that does this. They do it, they put it together in a controlled environment, they let it callus and heal, and then we get those vines back. But then every once in a while you make a mistake in this industry and you plant something and it doesn't work out. It doesn't taste good, it doesn't grow well. So this year I took some Graciano, and you just cut that Graciano off, and then I took some Malvasia Bianca, which is a beautiful floral wine, and our winemaker at Muriet as well wants that as part of the whip, a white blend. So you cut that off, and then people come out and they'll chip bud on and shove this little piece of this Malvasia Bianca on. So now it's 3 different plants there. One is the rootstock that's an American evolved vine. One is Graciano, and then it goes to the Malvasia. So then you have to do that outside because they're already planted. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, 20 years ago, every bottle would have had a cork on it, but now, like Riesling has a screw top.
Yep.
Chardonnay has a cork. So what,
So the question was...
decision,
It's a fair one. The question was, or the statement was, 20 years ago, everything had a cork on it, and now you're seeing more with screw caps. And Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling have a screw cap on it, but Morning Fog Chardonnay and Riva Ranch Chardonnay have a cork in it. But either way works. Now, it changes the oxygen dynamics, right? And so you might make the wine slightly differently if you know that it's going to a screw cap, because you put a little bit more oxygen into that wine through the winemaking process to make sure it doesn't have any of those reductive characteristics that can come in there. Fundamentally, I mean, it's a combination of the marketing team, which is know what people are looking for. On premise, in restaurants, restaurateurs love screw caps because you don't have to take the knife and cut that off. But you miss that. Some people in the restaurant don't like it. They like the ceremony of hearing that pop and having it come through. So it's a combination of what a winemaker says, this is what I think is best for this wine, and then the marketing team saying, this is what I think is the marketplace is looking for. So now as a chemical engineer and a winemaker, I'm pretty agnostic. Like it's slightly different out there. I notice when I'm at home, laziness takes over. If I have two bottles of wine on my counter and I want a glass of wine, I find myself going to the screw cap early just because it's easy and it's there. So that's a long-winded answer for there's there's no answer to it. Either way works. You have some, there's $200 Napa cabs that are in screw cap. Pretty much Australia has, the cork doesn't happen there all that often, and they're making some exceptional wines as well. So that was how about I meandered around and gave you a non-answer there. Does it affect the shelf life? Inevitably, yes, because that cork is, again, in biological material as insulation of an oak tree, and it's inherently fallible. It's not going to last forever. If it's in contact with the wine, like it'll degrade and break down. I don't know how many people have tried to pull a cork on a 50-year-old bottle of wine, right? It's brittle and it breaks. Versus that screw cap, if you seal it right, that's sealed in there, it's gonna stay fresher a lot longer. Now, is fresher what you want? Some people like their aged Cabernet. They want to go 10 years. And now if you went 10 years down the road, cork versus screw cap, they're going to be drastically different wines. But there's no right answer to it because you might like something that's different than what you like in terms of how that goes and ages. Any questions? Again, thank you all so much. Thank you to the LV Pack. And
Thank you, Karl. We have this plaque for you to commemorate your stay here, and I hope you like flowers.
I
There you
do.
go.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Everybody, thank you, Karl Wente.